Welcome to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven here in Jerusalem, Temple Institute. Today is the second day of the new month of Adar, 5777. It's the final day, the 28th of the month of February 2017. And as everybody knows, Rabbi Richman is currently in the United States, concluding tonight and tomorrow night his very speedy engagement tour. Tonight he will be speaking in Abilene, Texas, and tomorrow night, March 1st, he will be speaking in San Angelo, Texas. And if you have any way to get there, it's still not too late. I highly recommend it. I wouldn't miss the rabbi for anything. I'd walk across cut glass to hear the rabbi speak. But since he's there and I'm here, I'll be speaking alone today here in Temple Talk. This week, Parashat Terumah. And I have taken to referring to Parashat Terumah as the birthday Parsha of the Temple Institute, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And of course, the beginning of the month of Adar. There's so much to say about Adar, but perhaps most significantly, from a temple perspective and from a historical perspective, even from the perspective of Purim, which we're not going to be talking about this week, because next week we're going to be talking all about Purim. The most important aspect is the machatzit shekel, the half-shekel contribution. We read the portion about the half-shekel contribution, which is in the book of Exodus, chapter 33. We read it in synagogue this past Shabbat, because you read it in synagogue every year, either on the first Shabbat of Adar, or in the Shabbat preceding the first day of Adar. And in this case, Shabbat was literally the day before the new month. So we read it this past Shabbat. The commandment in Torah, God tells Moshe to tell the people that everyone is to give a half-shekel contribution to the upkeep of the tabernacle. Later on, the Holy Temple, the actual machatzit shekel, half-shekel contribution was collected every Adar, which is the final month of the Hebrew calendar, for well over 1,000 years in the land of Israel. And that money went toward the maintenance of the public offerings, as well as other aspects of the maintenance in the Holy Temple. And this week, Parashat Terumah. And there's nothing more beautiful than these opening words of Parashat Terumah, which is found in the book of Exodus, chapter 25, the very first verse of chapter 25. Hashem spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, and let them take for me a portion. From every man whose heart motivates him, you shall take my portion." A portion here is a Terumah, referring to giving something toward what? Toward what? God hasn't said yet. But he does say the next thing is, "This is the portion that you shall take from them: gold, silver, and copper, and turquoise, purple, and scarlet wool, linen, and goat hair, red-dyed ram skins, tahash skins, acacia wood, oil for illuminations, spices for the anointment oil, and the aromatics incense, shoham stones, and stones for the settings, for the ephod and the breastplate." Okay, all these things, but we still don't know what it's for. God is inviting everyone among the children of Israel who has a generous heart, whose heart motivates him, in Hebrew, yedivenu libo, literally a generous heart, to give of these different materials, precious metals and stones and oils and exotic fabrics. But for what purpose? And then verse 8, "They shall make for me a sanctuary, so that I may dwell among them, like everything that I show you, and the form of the tabernacle, and the form of all its vessels, and so shall you do." Yes, they shall make a sanctuary for me, God says to Moses. Here, the book of Exodus, chapter 25, verse 8. So, whoa, where's this coming from? I mean, up till now, the book of Exodus has been about, it's been about the Exodus from Egypt. It's been about the the adventures of the people of Israel who were enslaved in Egypt. God visits 10 plagues upon the Egyptians and then liberates Israel from Egypt. Egypt chases after them, only to find their demise at the Sea of Reeds. And then on the other side of the Sea of Reeds, Israel, all alone with God in a wilderness. And then all of a sudden, they're at Mount Sinai, the 10 Commandments, one thing after another. It's been God's courting, as it were, of the children of Israel. God wants to make them a nation. He wants them to be His people, and He wants to be their God. And God is pulling out all the stops. It's like God is saying, hey, look at me. What wouldn't I do for you? What wouldn't I, God, do for my people Israel? I'll do anything for you. And now, already 25 chapters into the book of Exodus, God says, well, there's one thing you can do for me. One little thing. God says, you could build for me a sanctuary so that I may dwell among you. Wow. So all of a sudden, the book of Exodus is going to take a real change of direction. At least it would seem. Because all of a sudden, all those adventures, all that talk of Exodus, all those other commandments about having a civil society, about honoring God and honoring your parents and keeping the Shabbats, they're going to be on a back burner for a short time now, actually, throughout the rest of the book of Exodus, because the entire rest of the book of Exodus will be concerned with the building of the tabernacle for God in the desert, and Exodus will conclude with the conclusion of the construction of the tabernacle and the actual setting up of the tabernacle. That's how it will conclude. So, what's going on here? I just saw something earlier online, a blog by a rabbi who lives in Israel. Looks very familiar to me. I don't know him, but he talks about this, and he says, what happened all of a sudden where Torah is just discussing all these details, and commandments, and measurements about the tabernacle and its vessels. And he said, what's it all about? He said, even if, in his words, even if you take literally, these are his words, that we will build the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, again one day, still, we're not commanded to rebuild the tabernacle. So it was a one-time commandment. And all these commandments really have no relevance to us today anymore. I mean, what do I need to know, he says, about gold plating the pieces that hold the posts, the curtains that form the courtyard around the tabernacle? What do I need to know that for? And he goes on to draw his own conclusion, which is not my conclusion, but still the question is there. What's going on here? Yes, this is a commandment, an important commandment. In fact, it's many commandments, all for a single purpose, and that is to build a dwelling place, a sanctuary for God's presence here on earth, here within His people. Why all the detail? The generation of the desert is often referred to as the generation of knowledge. It was the greatest generation. I mean, these people went from slaves to free men. They crossed the Sea of Reeds, which was a wall of water to their left and a wall of water to their right. They sang the song of the sea. They stood at Sinai. They heard God's voice directly. God spoke to them. They had many great accomplishments and many failures as well. But what really makes them the great generation that they were? After all, they ultimately stumbled with the sin of the spies And this generation didn't enter the land. It was only their children who entered the land. So what's it all about? Well, I will postulate, I will propose that the great thing that this generation did was to build the Mishkan, the tabernacle. And that's why the Torah is so involved in the minutiae of the commandment. That's why the Torah presents with so much tenderness and love every detail. First, God's commandment to Moshe while Moshe is still in Mount Sinai for 40 days, and I'll get to that later. And then later, Moshe again repeats these commandments to Israel, and then later we read about how Israel fulfilled the commandments. In the meantime, we're already reading about God is asking Moshe to turn to the people and ask for them to give of themselves, to give of their materials, to give of their time, to give of their skills in order to do this. And I believe that this project, this national project of building the tabernacle, was the greatest accomplishment of this great generation that left Egypt and received Torah at Mount Sinai and spent 40 years in the desert. This was their single most greatest accomplishment. Why? Well, because God commanded it, and they did it. And God said, do it for me. He said, build for me. Up till now, last week's Parsha, we learned a lot about mishpatim, about civil law, about how to be responsible for ourselves, for our property, for our neighbor's property. If you have an ox, and the ox gores the neighbor's ox, what do you need to do? How do you compensate him? How do you discipline your ox? What responsibility do you take? These are all commandments that are for our good, for the good of society. These are all commandments that, we need to subscribe to these commandments because, we need to have our lives in order. We can't just have anarchy. These are all commandments that we can understand, that we can study, that we can easily turn into practical application, and they're all necessary for our well-being. But then God says to Moses, build for me a sanctuary, Asuli Mikdash. Mikdash, literally a sanctified place, a holy place. Build it for me, that I may dwell amongst you. And okay, well, someone might ask, well, what's in it for me? What's in it for us? What's in it for society? What's in it for the people of Israel? And that's the point here. First of all, there's a whole lot in it, and I will answer those questions soon. But God isn't phrasing this commandment in those terms. He's saying, do it for me, so that I can dwell among you. And that is the beauty of this commandment, that God is asking. God is commanding us to do something that's bigger than us, do something that is not ostensibly for us. God wants this, do it for God. We do things for people who we love. We do things out of love. We do things for others as an expression of love. And that's what God is commanding the entire nation of Israel to do as a single nation. To do this out of love for God. And that elevates the individual, it elevates society, it elevates the nation. In fact, that first word, Parashat Terumah, the name of this week's Parsha, Hashem spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel and let them take for me a portion. The word which is translated as portion is not really a proper translation. Terumah, which in modern Hebrew refers to a donation or contribution. either monetary or a truma, your torem of your time or your talents, your energies. And the word literally means to lift up. Because Torah is teaching us when we give of ourselves to someone else or to another, we're lifting ourselves up. There's no greater thing we can do for ourselves than to give of ourselves, to give to another, for another. And that is the introduction to the building of the tabernacle. That's the introduction to what will eventually be the Holy Temple, and that's the introduction to the relationship between God and Israel, intimate relationship between God and his people, which its ultimate expression is the Holy Temple and is the avodah, the service in the Holy Temple. We concluded last week's Parashat Mishpatim with the vision of the elite group of Israelites who got to see the vision of the sapphire brickwork beneath God's feet, as it were. And then Moses is commanded by God to go up to the top of Mount Sinai, which is still bo'er, it's still burning, it's still full of fire and smoke. And after 6 days, God commands Moshe to come in to the fire. And so for 40 days and 40 nights, we're told at the conclusion of Mishpatim, Moses will be in Mount Sinai with God. In fact, it says like this: Moses arrived in the midst of the cloud and ascended the mountain, and Moses was on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. And on that mountain, God will give to Moses the entire Torah and the luchot and the 2 tablets of the law, which he will bring down from Mount Sinai after 40 days. So, Israel's received 10 commandments. Israel's gotten according to the chronology of Torah, Israel's received the 10 commandments before Moses goes up for 40 days, and Israel has received a sort of a crash course in civil law here, how to take care of yourselves. And then Moses goes up for 40 days and 40 nights. And then what's the first thing God tells Moses? What's the first thing God tells Moses? The first commandment? Well, we just read it. Take for me a truma, a contribution from every man whose heart motivates him. He shall take my portion. And what is that for? That they shall make for me a sanctuary. So isn't it curious that the first commandment God will give over to Moses in Mount Sinai and his 40-day retreat, his 40 days of isolation from the rest of the world? What's the first thing God gives to Moses? Build for me a sanctuary. Is that really the most important thing? Is that really a priority here? Apparently it is. You see, God knows that for this people to become a nation, not just a society that has civil laws in place so that people's oxes can't go on goring sprees, nobody will pay the price. No, for this people to become a nation, which is what God wants Israel to be, they need a national purpose. They need a national identity. They need a national expression. Now, this people's not just going to become any nation. They're going to become a nation of God, a nation under God, a nation whose God is with them every day. And so this national purpose, this national expression, this national identity is embodied in the building of the tabernacle, in the service in the tabernacle, and eventually in the Holy Temple, in the service of the Holy Temple. That's the ultimate expression of who the nation of Israel is, and the purpose of the nation of Israel, to bring God's presence into this world, to create an environment in our nation where God's presence can dwell amongst us, and where we can draw ourselves near to God's presence. You know, I think this is especially relevant today and all over the world, but also especially relevant in the United States. In the United States, there seems to be a big argument going on. A lot of polarization and animosity. And one of the words that gets thrown around a lot is nationalism. And nationalism is used in a negative way very often. You know, a couple of decades ago, with the advent of globalization and with the creation of the European Union, the intellectuals and many of the politicians in the post-Cold War era had come to the conclusion that borders and nationalities and national identities were no longer necessary, that we were all equal and we all had our own cultures, and there was no such thing as right or wrong anymore, because I may be right from my side, but you're certainly right from your side, and everything is just, what's the word? I can't judge you, you can't judge me. Ultimately, there's no right or wrong anymore. It's what feels good. And the idea of a nation having an identity or an expression of its highest instincts, of its highest aspirations, became a bad thing. No, I don't need to aspire toward a common goal anymore. I can express myself however I want. I can create something new about myself and decide that, well, this is who I am, so I'm just as equal and justified and righteous and as anybody else. And if you don't agree, then, well, you're a this phobic or a that phobic or a racist or a whatever. Well, but here's the music. I talk too much, people. I talk too much. I will be back after the music. Stay with me, Temple Talk. Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk here in Israel, Jerusalem. This is Yitzchak Ruvain. Today is the second day of the month of Adar, 5777. It's the 28th day of the month of February, 2017. As everybody knows, Rabbi Richman is in the United States, finishing up his speaking engagement tour tonight, the 28th of February. He will be speaking in Abilene, Texas, and tomorrow night, the 1st of March, he will be speaking in San Angelo, Texas. If you can get over there, I highly recommend it. I just want to tell everybody that if I'm talking too much, just stop me, okay? I won't be insulted. I feel like I just went on and on and on that first half and didn't know where to stop. Fortunately, the music played and brought me back to my senses. Anyway, this week, Parashat Terumah. Next Saturday night, Sunday, is the 7th day of the month of Adar. And that is the birthday and the day of the passing of Moshe Rabbeinu, of Moses, our master. And we mark that day to this day. Many of us light a candle, a memorial candle, for Moses, who was born on that day and perished on that day 120 years later. And of course, Adar is just chock full of special days. We began with Parashat Shkolim, the reading of the Torah portion, which refers to the half-shekel offering. And we, of course, just mentioned Moshe Rabbeinu's birthday and Yortzeit day of his passing. And then we have the fast of Esther, which is the day before leading up to Purim. This will be a little bit forward because Purim actually falls out on a Saturday night, and we do not fast on Shabbat, so the fast of Esther will be pushed forward 2 days to Thursday, because we don't fast on the eve of Shabbat either. And in between the fast of Esther and Purim, we'll be reading in the synagogue on Shabbat Parashat Zachor, remembering Amalek, to destroy his memory. And right after Purim is Shushan Purim, where Purim is celebrated in Jerusalem and in Shiloh and in other cities which were walled cities during the time of Joshua. And later in the month we read the Parashat Adumah, Parashat Para of the red heifer, because the red heifer was a necessary, or the ashes of the red heifer were necessary for the purification of the people who would be bringing up their Passover offerings next month for Passover. And finally we read right before the month of Nisan, the month of Passover, we read Parashat HaChodesh, which is the reading from Exodus 12, I believe, where we're commanded to spot and cite and designate and mark the new month, the new moon, and start our months with the new moon and calibrate our time according to that. First of our months with is Nisan. So it is an action-packed month, this month of Adar, known as a month of joy. When Adar enters, Shenichnas Adar Marbeh Simcha. When Adar enters, we increase joy, and of course, it's the joy of Purim, and it's the joy of getting ready for next month, which is the Passover. So there's a lot of things to be joyful for in this month, and a lot of things to do as we start to emerge from the winter. And we are now beginning what will be for the next few months, very, very busy months between the opening of Adar and the Shavuot, which is still 3 months away. We were talking about building the tabernacle in the desert, and I was talking about how God saw fit to discuss this commandment as the first commandment that he will discuss with Moshe Rabbeinu on Mount Sinai in Moshe's 40 days and 40 nights, which he spent alone with God. And of course, the significance of it and the importance of it is in order to forge a nation out of this people. And Israel's had 2 temples so far, and each one was built by the people of Israel. And the first one was built by King Solomon, after his father, King David, unified the nation and defeated our enemies and brought peace to the nation. And his son Solomon was able to build the Holy Temple. And it was an expression of thanks, an expression of unification, an expression of the power of this people, expression of the power of God and the glory of God, that it is our mission, our purpose to spread to all the nations. And finally the temple was rebuilt again by the returnees from Babylon under Ezra and Nehemiah. And again, an expression of love for God, an expression of who we are. And you might say, well, okay, Israel is a nation again now after 2,000 years in exile. And Jerusalem was liberated and unified 50 years ago, so where's today's temple? That's a very good question. And of course, I firmly believe that it is our obligation, it is our privilege to rebuild the Holy Temple and to renew the Avodah, the divine service. And it is a commandment, and it stands to this day, even if some of the details that we learn about concerning the tabernacle itself in the desert aren't directly applicable. Still, there is much about those details that really are applicable, and of course all the vessels that we're going to be studying. And the Temple Institute has recreated in anticipation of the rebuilding of the Holy Temple. So yes, the time has come, dear people, for Israel to rebuild the Holy Temple. Again, God brought us out of Egypt. God performed signs and wonders, miracles for his people. And God said, build for me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among you. Why do you think I did all this? I want to dwell among you. I want to be within your midst. So most certainly today, Israel is a strong and powerful and righteous and good and decent nation, but we sorely need to build a holy temple. We sorely need to place God at the center of who we are as a nation, not just as individuals. Yes, everybody says, or many people say, you know what? My body's my temple. God dwells within me. That's wonderful. But we are a nation, and God needs to dwell within us as a nation. And God gave us a prescription for that. Build me a sanctuary, and I will dwell amongst you. So yes, we very much are in the time of man where building the temple is what we are about. It's what we are talking about. It's what we are discussing. It's what we at the Temple Institute are teaching to people, explaining to people, are making our own preparations in terms of building the vessels. And what I said much earlier in the program, that Parashat Terumah is really the birthday Parsha of the Temple Institute, because we're all about build for me a sanctuary. That's what this organization is dedicated to. And that's what we've been working toward for 30 years. And we have made such strides. When I first came to Israel some 36 years ago, and I looked for anything, a picture, a book, an explanation of what I was reading in the Torah, what I was reading in these verses. You know, what did the tabernacle look like? What did the menorah look like? What did the showbread table look like? There was nothing. Actually, I can't say there was nothing. There were a couple of mimeographed booklets stapled together that you could buy at a bookstore here or there, that I'm sure the person who put together brought himself and said, would you mind putting these on your shelves? And someone like me came along and bought a copy. But yes, I would say that to a great extent, the Temple Institute is the reason why there is much greater knowledge about the Holy Temple today, about what it was, about what it will be amongst the Jews, amongst the Gentiles. The Temple Institute gives people what to look at, gives people the vessels, and proves that these vessels can be made, that the instructions in the Torah were not some kind of a make-believe or mystical in formula, but these are very real and practical, doable commandments, and we have done them. And we have commissioned painters to paint what the daily offerings look like, and what it looked like on Passover in the Holy Temple, and what it looked like on Shavuot and Sukkot, and what the Kohanim looked like. And we've recreated the garments of the Kohanim, including the garments of the high priest. So today, if somebody has the question, what did the high priest look like? They can pick up one of our books. They can stop at the Temple Institute's Visitor Center here in Jerusalem. They can go online and just Google garments of the high priest, and they'll find our images, the clothing, the garments that we made. So yes, what am I leading up to here? Yes, I'm leading up to a little plug. I'm leading up to a if you want to be part of this, if you want to be part of this tremendous spiritual awakening and revolution, which is leading, we hope, and we pray, leading the world away from the abyss of materialism, of consumerism, of I, me, mine-ism, of every man does what's right in his own eyes-ism. All these things that are tearing societies apart. If you want to be part of a better future, if you want to be part of a world in which God dwells amongst the nations, a world in which there's a house of prayer for all the nations. Yeah, I'm pulling out all the stops here. Pulling out all the stops. If you want to be part of that, then join us. Join the Temple Institute. How can you join us? Well, you can come and visit. You can read our books. You can watch our videos. You can visit our website, our Facebook page, and you can also contribute of your money. It sounds crude, and I'm always shy of saying it, but we're reading Parashat Terumah, and it opens up with, I'll quote again, Hashem says to Moses, say, speak to the children of Israel and let them take for me a portion, a Terumah, from every man and woman whose heart motivates him or her, you shall take my portion. And of course, the month of Adar is the month of the machatzit shekel, of the half-shekel offering, which every soul in Israel is commanded to give. Rich and poor alike, everybody gives a half-shekel because we all are the same. We all are equal in God's eyes, and we all are half a shekel and not a whole shekel, because only together can we be whole. And that half shekel traditionally went toward the maintenance of the offerings in the Holy Temple. And today, I'm getting many requests from people. How can I do a half shekel offering today, a half shekel contribution? Can I send it to you? Yes, the answer is yes, because our work is dedicated toward the rebuilding of the Holy Temple and toward the renewal of the avodah, of the divine service in the Holy Temple. And if I didn't believe that we were leading toward that the world is getting closer to that the nation of Israel is preparing for that, then I would say, no, I have no answer for you. I don't know what you should do with it. I don't know what to tell you, but no. I sincerely believe in my heart and on my soul that we are on the path toward the rebuilding of the Holy Temple. And I will testify to you that any contribution that you make toward the Temple Institute, toward the work that we do, is a contribution that is going to be directed toward the rebuilding of the Holy Temple, and which of course will lead to the renewal of the divine service, which we believe and which Torah teaches us will lead to the unity of mankind. Yes, peace. Yes, tranquility. Yes, a much better world than the world we live in today. So, without any further ado, if it is in your heart to help support the work of the Temple Institute, then you are invited to go to our website, templeinstitute.org. Go to our donate page. You'll see it there. You'll see a big image that says donate. You can go to our Facebook page and access us from there. And this month we have a special operation, which is, I guess we can call it Operation Half Shekel. A half shekel today is worth, in current terms, $39. If you would like to make a donation of $39 as a half shekel contribution, you are welcome to. Please designate it either in the PayPal form, if you do it by PayPal, or in an email, or however you would like to communicate with us, that it is for the half shekel. And we'll acknowledge it and thank you very much for it. And in general, support the work of the Temple Institute, because we believe we are working together with you, and for a very, very, very good and holy purpose. By the way, I had a WhatsApp conversation, SMS, with Rabbi Richmond just before we opened the show. And I asked the rabbi if he had any message for our many listeners, and he just said, "Send them my love," which is, I think that's pretty beautiful. So, love from Rabbi Richmond. He'll be back next week, although I have a feeling I will be doing, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I have a feeling I'll be doing Temple Talk again by my lonesome next week, because I feel that by the time the rabbi has got his land legs again, it will we'll have already recorded Temple Talk. In the meantime, in the upcoming verses and chapters of Parashat Terumah, there's a description of all the sacred vessels that are needed for this tabernacle / holy temple. There's the Ark of the Covenant, the menorah, the table of the showbread, the incense altar. There's the outer altar, stone altar. There are all the different implements, spoons and shovels and all sorts of things for carrying coals and carrying incense, etc., etc. And all this needs to be built and created. And all these precious materials that are listed at the beginning of Parashat Terumah, the gold, silver, and copper, turquoise, purple, and scarlet wool, linen and goat hair, red dyed ram skins, tachash skins, acacia wood, oil, spices, precious stones. Where did they come from? I mean, this isn't a people who were slaves just a couple months ago. Where did they get all this? Well, of course, they got it from the Egyptians themselves, because God said, "When you leave, I will be certain that you will find favor in the eyes of the Egyptians, and every man and every woman will go to their neighbor and say, give to us of your riches, so that we may take it out of Egypt." And what was it for? Was it to enrich the children of Israel so that they would have nice things in the desert? Absolutely not. It was ultimately for the building of the tabernacle. And how curious that the Egyptians actually had made a very, very significant contribution. Maybe they were the first ones to make a contribution toward the tabernacle, toward creating a sanctuary for God on earth. And maybe there's something to learn from that. It's the commandment is for Israel to build the holy temple, the tabernacle. But of course, it is ultimately a house of prayer for all nations, and ultimately everyone, every God-fearing person has a share in the tabernacle / holy temple. So the people brought out all these riches, and they were then, without hesitation, they brought them to Moses, as we'll see, in order to be used in the tabernacle. There's not a recorded case here of anything that someone said, "Oh, you know what? I just can't part with this. It's too beautiful. It's too precious to me. I think I'll keep it in my tent." There's not a recorded case of that in the Torah, because everybody was inspired. Everybody, it turns out, had a generous heart. And I guess when we're really listening and we hear God's voice, and God says, "Build for me a sanctuary that I may dwell amongst you," I guess that's all that we need to rise up to the occasion. And I think today, if people were hearing that voice and hearing it coming from God, and not saying, "Oh, that this one or that one, they're a little bit crazy, they want a holy temple, they want to make war, they want to do this, that, blah, blah, blah." I think if people would just listen, turn off your devices for a minute, and turn off the television, and just listen for a minute and hear God's voice. I think the world as one would give of themselves to build for God a sanctuary, a place so that he can dwell amongst us here on this earth. In the meantime, it's Adar. Purim is coming up. There's lots to do, lots of excitement. And I wish that everybody should have a very, very, very happy and joy-filled month of Adar, and that all our dreams will come true. Thank you so much for being with me. Temple Talk.